Hi there, and welcome to the Kingdom Sexuality podcast. We're Paris and Alana, friends who have a heart for intimacy and long to uncover God's truth and design for sexual freedom within marriage. Welcome here. Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the Kingdom Sexuality podcast. Alana and I have 2 episodes here. This is actually a part 1 of a 2-part series that we're going to be diving into. Last year, if you guys have been around for a year, we went into New Year's resolutions and kind of our thoughts on that and the stigmas around it. We broke some of those down. And this kind of complements this really well because naturally, I think as people, we go into the new year, like really taking a step back and reevaluating our lives. And it's a fresh year and a fresh start. And we look at this next year coming, we're like, okay, what are our goals? What are we working towards? You know, and you kind of take an overview of your life, right? And I feel like that's pretty normal. And so Alana and I sat down and we're like, what do we want to put out coming into the new year for some content for you guys? And we just really felt led to lay out really taking charge of your marriage and the emotional and sexual relationship within your marriage. So before we get into the sexual part, you guys know that's really the basis of this entire ministry. But we need to get on the same page with our spouses emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially. You know, there's so many areas before the entire sexual aspect of your marriage can really flow freely. So we want to lay down some really biblical truths around creating that foundation for your marriage, you know, and this is really good no matter where you're at in your relationship. If you are newlywed, if you're like 20 years in, it really doesn't matter if you're going through a lot right now or a hard time, or maybe you're in like an amazing part of your marriage right now. There's always room for growth, which I think is beautiful. And I want to encourage you guys to view it that way. And so this can be applicable to you no matter where you're at in your marriage.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. I feel like we need to be thinking that. We need to be aware that, okay, you don't just say I do and reach the finish line. That's just like the start of the finish, like the start of the race, right?
Exactly.
So to then go in and be like, okay, how can we grow? How can we grow emotionally? Like, you know, build that emotional connection to then build into our sexual connection, right? And how to grow that as well. Because it's not, marriage isn't just all one giant encompassing thing that you get married and you grow this marriage. Like you're growing like a million different facets of your marriage at different times. So no, I'm excited about this. It'll be good.
Me too. I feel like there is a lot of confusion around, okay, how do you legit grow forward in your marriage when exactly like you just mentioned, Alana, there's so many facets involved. So that's what we're going to actually break down for you guys today. And we're really excited to unpack this because it is a lot. So we want to encourage you to really sit down, grab a pen and a paper, and really just start praying into this because there's a lot of information we're going to share with you guys here. So we're going to get super honest, super vulnerable. That's what we do. And we're just going to start into this. So I want to make a bold statement to really start this off. Marriage cannot stagnate. You may disagree with me on this. That is fine. But if you're looking at the general laws of this world, you're either growing forward or falling backwards in anything you put your hand to. And I don't think marriage is an exception to that. So I'm going to stand on that and say marriage cannot stagnate. Your marriage is either moving forward in growth or it's falling backwards and you're losing traction. There is always movement. Whatever way it's going is ultimately your choice, which is the other bold statement we're going to stand on today.
Yeah.
Your marriage is not going to change or grow or flourish unless you're actively making that choice to change and grow and flourish together as a couple and as individuals with your walk with the Lord, right? And personal development. Alana, you mentioned this actually not long ago on a podcast we were on. Marriage should never be a 50-50 relationship. It's not a 50-50 relationship. Biblically, it's 100% and 100%. You're
Mm-hmm.
giving 100%, 100% of the time, ideally, right?
Yeah.
And yes, we're flawed and we're human, but the heart behind this is that's what we are goaling towards, right? We're giving our, our all to serve, to love, to bless, to pursue our spouse that the Lord has given us. And serving the Lord through that is a whole entire other entity, right? Like, yes, we're doing this for this person that we love and the Lord's given to us, but ultimately we're serving the Lord through our ministry of marriage, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in a place in your marriage where your marriage is not at that 100 state and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, we are so not there. We have a lot that we're working towards. Get excited because we all have a lot we're working towards, and we're going to unpack some really good stuff here. Because, biblically, the the foundation behind a serious, lasting, meaningful, beautiful, like anointed marriage is there's so much about that within scripture, and that's what we really want to bring to the table today.
Yeah. And I love how you worded that. Like, your marriage is either growing or it's going backwards. And it's so true. And
Yeah.
you think about it with anything. Like, say you like learn to play the piano once, and
Mm-hmm.
then now you're like an adult and you go back and you're like, ugh, I don't like, I vaguely remember, but I don't really remember, because you
Yes.
haven't grown it. You haven't honed those skills, right? And same
Yes.
with your, walk with the Lord. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
putting time and intention and,
Mm-hmm.
purpose into, having a quiet time, praying, growing your spiritual life, you'll
Yes.
be going backwards. Like, if you
Yes,
won't be
you do.
growing forwards. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
that's so valuable in so many different areas of our lives to think, and just to,
Mm-hmm.
think about it and stop and be like, are we growing or no? Because if we're not
Yes.
growing right now, odds are good we're slowly slipping, backwards, which who wants
Yeah.
that? Nobody does. So,
Yeah.
100%.
Exactly. Okay, so we actually jotted these down in point form to make this easy for you guys to write down. So we have a total of 5 key points we want to really unpack as far as fundamentals of marriage and continuing a flourishing marriage. Okay, so number one that we wrote here, and these are not in order, by the way. Like, this is not in order of an importance. This is just the points written down for you guys. So number one is be the change. If you need to see a change, you need to be a change. The Lord gives to those who ask, to those who seek him, to those who are pursuing him and his will, right? Alana, you just mentioned we need to be in the scriptures every single day growing
Mm-hmm.
forward. Otherwise, yes, we fall backwards. And on top of that, marriage is a very sacred covenant. And so putting in those skill sets that you're learning and you're pursuing is going to be putting in that consistent effort and the education, the heart work into your marriage. And that is God's will for your marriage, by the way. God has designed marriage to be a reflection of his love for us and so many other things. And I think that's amazing that we have the amazing anointing over us to be able to mirror that. And that's not something we should be taking lightly.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, don't allow room for the enemy to just throw those distractions in from your marriage to steal space from your marriage. Your marriage relationship should be one of the highest priorities in your life. And I think if we all honestly sit with that thought for a second, we're like, there's this one area where it's definitely not, right? And
Right.
it's good to sit back and to reevaluate those things in your life, to have these conversations with your spouse, and to get on that same page. So, if
Mm-hmm.
you know there's changes that need to be made in your marriage, be the change. That's the bottom line. I think a lot of time, going back to that comment I made about the enemy throwing distractions your way, I think a common distraction that I've seen and heard quite often is really unfortunate, and it actually really makes me sad. And I hear more often than I would ever like to hear it is, oh, well, my husband won't change, so we're getting nowhere. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
girlfriend, no. It's not on your husband to be the change so your marriage can change. There's definitely elements that play into that. Yes. And yes, ideally and biblically, he is the headship of the marriage and the entire, family elements. But you are not powerless to make
No.
change.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is a lie that the enemy really will tend to throw at women. And so I just wanted to speak into that and say, no, women, you are not powerless to make change. You have way more influence than you realize. Alana, you shared this verse a while back in one of our episodes about, with us being faithful and loyal to Christ, that we can win our husbands over to the same fight that we are really battling over, right? And I
Right.
think that is something that we should never, ever discredit.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. And we cannot wait for our spouse to do their 100. You know how you were like, we each have to do 100
Yes.
and 100. You can't be
Yes.
waiting for the spouse. Like, that's not the
Yeah.
point of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you should not be waiting for them to do their part, because that's
Yeah.
the serve. Like you mentioned earlier, you're serving the
Exactly.
Lord through this. Um,
Yes.
and I know, and I was like this too. So many couples, once they get married, first there's like once you get married, and then there's once you have kids, you realize this, but
Mm-hmm.
how selfish we are,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like I know so many people, it's like, oh my goodness, I had no idea I was so selfish. But that's what marriage is all about, selflessness, right? Putting your own
Yes.
needs on the back burner. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have kids and you're like, oh my goodness, there's an even further
There's
burner in the
even
back.
more.
Like,
Yes.
how am I putting
Yes.
myself way back here? But it's true.
Yes.
And it's not easy. But
Mm-hmm.
putting in that work and you doing your 100, regardless of where your spouse is at,
Mm-hmm.
will be worth it.
Yes, it
And
absolutely will.
and good things, like an amazing marriage, isn't just going to happen. It comes from
Mm-hmm.
putting in the work and doing the hard
Exactly.
things. And that's when you get to the next level. And that's when your spouse then is like, oh, I need to be doing more. Like, I need to be putting in my 100.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, you're essentially turning up the heat, right? You're leveling up,
yeah.
and the Lord works through that because the Lord is going to bless that and your work through him because that is his will. And I think that's really, really, really beautiful thing.
hmm And at the same time, I feel like there is, like, especially when it comes in the realm of your spiritual life and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for my spouse to be ready to do this with me, to, be praying together with me, to be digging into the scriptures with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't need to wait for your spouse.
No.
You should just run. Like,
Yeah.
there's no point in just sitting and waiting for your spouse to be on the same
Mm-hmm.
page with you spiritually. If you're
Mm-hmm.
ready to just, dive in, go to the next level and dig into the word and dig into Jesus, like,
Yes.
you should be doing that regardless of where your spouse is at with their spiritual walk.
Yes.
I just felt like I need to say that. You don't need to be
Yeah.
ready for your spouse, like, or waiting for them, sorry. Like,
Yes.
it's great
Yeah.
if you can do it together and they're also on the same page
Mm-hmm.
with you spiritually,
But
but if
don't
they're
let it
not,
hold you
don't
back.
let it hold you back. Absolutely.
I love that. Absolutely. I love that you said that. Okay. So the next thing we want to say on the heels of this is know whose you are and establish the foundations of your marriage. What essentially is your marriage built upon? Do you know the answer to that when I say that? Or are you like, I have no idea. We've never had that conversation. Like, what is our foundation? I don't know. This is why we're saying this. This
Mm,
is very important fundamentals to have a very meaningful and purposeful and deep marriage together as spouses. You need to know what you are fundamentally built upon, whose you are in Christ. Like that should be a clear-cut vision. Um, because that is going to take away a lot of dissension that could come from not knowing whose you are, from not knowing what your marriage is built upon. What are key fundamentals to you and your spouse within your marriage? What are things that you just are, there's like, you're not going to compromise ever on
mm,
X, Y, and Z. Like what are your boundaries within your marriage? Every marriage is built within healthy, thriving boundaries that are there for your good and his glory. And I think
yeah.
those are super important things to really get clear on. If you haven't had that conversation or you don't know where you guys stand on that, or you just haven't visited that conversation in a while, absolutely do it.
hmm
Absolutely.
And something that came to mind when you were saying that, Paris, it was just like the, foundations of your marriage, is if
Mm-hmm.
you haven't ever done it, I would really encourage you to come up with like a mission statement as a couple.
Love that.
Like what do we believe? What are our values? What do we want for our family?
Yeah.
Um, Jeff and I, when we were in Bible school, we were supposed to come up with individual, or maybe it was for our premarital counseling, but also we were at Bible school. But
Mm-hmm.
it would have been 2012 or 2013. Jeff and I would have made this.
Mm-hmm.
So we had decided that our mission in life is to discover, give, and love relationships through leading and hospitality.
Love that.
So there was, I think, different things you look at a list and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, what words just like
Really
speak
stand
to
out to
me,
you. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
like mine was, my mission in life is to discover, dream, and encourage relationships through hospitality and love. And so, and then when you looked at ours individually, and then we both had like, giving was really valuable to us.
Yeah.
Hospitality was valuable to us.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow relationships, like we were like, we knew that was a part of our mission statement as well,
Yeah.
which is funny because then now I'm doing this and it has to do with relationships. But you take them, your individual ones, and then you use together, put like a joint one together and be like, okay, what do we believe? What is our little marriage, what is our marriage going to stand
Mm-hmm.
on? And, what are our passions, right? And so I feel like that's a good part of it. And thinking more about,
Absolutely.
um, you're like whose you are, but also
Mm-hmm.
think about who you are.
Yeah.
Because I know for myself, like I got married, I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was still in the process of learning who I was. Jeff was
Oh,
in the
for
process of
sure.
still learning who he was,
Yeah.
and for me, like, let alone who I was as like a wife or who he was as a
Right.
husband, right? We don't even know who we are
Yeah.
yet. And so I
Yeah.
found growing in my own identity and doing things for me that I like. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, no, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go take photos, or I'm going to, whatever, having things that fill my cup
For sure.
outside of Jeff
Yeah.
is really healthy, because then I'm learning who I am and I'm growing my own passions and desires, and then it just helps your marriage in the long run anyway, because you're
Yes.
taking care of you and learning who you are to then
Yes.
learn who you are as wife or husband. So
Yeah.
that also
Absolutely.
came to mind with that.
I love that. That's fantastic. All right. So going on to point number 3 is we just wrote down literally be a warrior. Because your marriage is not all butterflies and rainbows and roses, you guys. I'm pretty sure I don't need to actually tell you guys that. But fighting for your marriage is a very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to caution you guys to not belittle that reality. We're really belittling the spirit within us and the spiritual warfare around us if we're not taking this to heart. We need to be actively covered in our spiritual armor every single day, you guys, because the battle is literally always happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to encourage you guys in that. Fight for your marriage, fight for your family. And by fighting and being warrior, I meaning like spiritually donning yourself with the armor of God and really understanding that realm, studying it if this is something that's totally new to you guys. Because it's very much a reality, right? We have an
Mm-hmm.
enemy that is constantly pitting against us, right?
Yeah.
So pray over your marriage, you guys. Pray over your marriage. Like Alana said earlier, even if this is not a point where you and your spouse are maybe on the same page on, you take the initiative. You pray over your marriage. Pray over your
Mm-hmm.
marriage and express that with your spouse that this is something that the Lord has really laid heavy on your heart, and you want to make an active daily part of your relationship, and your reality. Praying with your spouse is such a beautiful thing. Also, Alana already mentioned this, to be in the scriptures. This is your strongest weapon of warfare. And knowledge and wisdom is where you're going to find all of that in there too. Literally everything we go through in life, in marriage, it is all there. Your answers are in the scriptures and meeting with the Lord every single day. So don't demean that either. And then another thing that I feel like we also discredit or maybe don't realize the power of it is just worshiping the Lord. Let that set
Mm-hmm.
the tone of your heart and your mind every single day. Putting on worship music and just standing in praise to the Lord every single day. I cannot tell you how big of a deal that is in my life. On a personal note, I am a very musical person. I've been playing piano since I was 6. And so a lot of how I would express my heart and just meet with the Lord was through playing piano and just worshiping Him.
Mm.
But my goodness, the days where I am just like really in the trenches with warfare, and you just feel like the battles are coming at every single side, and I'm not in active worship, it I'm hurt, I'm bleeding after that day's done. But the
Mm-hmm.
days where I am standing in worship, I am telling you guys, it changes my heart's tone and my mindset so fast. And you're literally just worshiping God in his presence. And there's so much power in that. And there's so much encouragement and refinement and beauty in that. And it's huge to do that, over your home and over your marriage. So I just wanted to really share that because I had a really beautiful experience with that last week, specifically after a really rough day and some pretty big attacks. And I was just like, man, I need to go worship. I literally went into my bathroom, turned on one of my favorite worship songs, and I did my makeup and I just cried and prayed and worshiped the Lord. And it was beautiful. It was all of 10 minutes in my bathroom, but it changed the entire day for me.
Yes. And that's something my mom always says, and maybe I've said it on here before, but atmosphere holds inventory.
Yes. Love that.
Right. So I know
Absolutely.
one day I was at my parents' house and I was going to get the back bedroom ready to put Theo down for a nap. And I go in the room and I hear something. And I find there's a phone on the floor and there's like, it's, on the Bible app, how you can just have it playing and it'll just be
Yes.
reading.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was doing that. And so I like turned it off. I was like, Mom, like this was in your bed. She's like, oh, I know. She's like, I was just having the scriptures being read in my house. Like, I was like, oh. She's
Yes.
like, I just leave it on. It's really quiet, but it's just being
Yes.
spoken out into
It's
my
there.
home. Right.
Absolutely.
And something,
Absolutely.
right? Like how valuable. And
Mm-hmm.
another thing I was thinking about when you were talking about your your bathroom experience, which is amazing. Also, I can't imagine trying to put makeup on and also crying. That would be
Yeah,
really
I don't
tricky.
recommend it. Let's just say I didn't get into that part of the story, but don't recommend.
Is it doesn't have to be, you're like, oh, well, you know what? I've got like 5 kids or I'm at work all the day, like all day long. I don't have time to just sit down. I mean, we can make time. Let's be honest. We can make time for one, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be this grand thing where you're
In
laying
there.
out your Bible and all your journals and you're on your knees and you're like,
Yeah.
leave me alone. I need 2 hours to spend with the
Yeah.
Lord. Like, yes, it can be that. And what a blessing if you get that. Like, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you can also just be in constant communion with the Lord all day long and be like,
Yes.
thank you, Lord, for this day. Like, you're just thinking it, thank you for my kids. Give me
Yes.
patience. Like, give me patience right now for my kids. Or,
Yes.
even saying it out loud, like to your children, like something I try and do all the time is like, oh, Theo, like, look at the sunshine. Isn't it so
Mm-hmm.
amazing that Jesus gave us sunshine? Or like really
Yes.
basic things. It's like, okay, honey, make sure you're chewing your teeth. Isn't it amazing that Jesus gave us teeth? Like that God gave us teeth. We can
Yes.
chew our food, right? You're just making it really tangible.
Absolutely.
But it's
Yes.
just constant communion. You're just thanking the Lord for what he's doing, asking him for things in the moment
Mm-hmm.
when you're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I am so frustrated. Like, and even the
Mm-hmm.
other day, we were going to go look at a house and Jeff was like, hey, do you want to pray? Like, we can go look at this house today. And so I went over to Theo and I was like, you know what, Theo, we just need to pray right now because we're maybe going to look at a house today. And we need to
Mm-hmm.
pray that if this is something Jesus wants for us, that the door will open. But if it's not, that it will just be shut and that we won't even get to look at the house and that we won't get it or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so we prayed right then and there and ended up, we didn't even look at, it didn't even work to look at the house. And I was like, perfect,
Right.
door slammed.
Yes.
But it was just an opportunity to then show him even what it looks like to just, we're
Yes.
stopping, we're putting the tractors down, we're going to quickly pray together
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll pick up and we'll play after, right? But I feel
Yeah.
like, anyways, that just came to my mind. This is part of what it looks like to be a warrior and fight for your marriage is even
Yes, for
constantly throughout your
sure.
day being like, you see the socks on the floor, they're beside the laundry hamper, they're not in the hamper, they're right beside it, and you're getting frustrated and you're like, Jesus, thank you that I have a husband who has feet, has socks, like
Yes.
find things to be thankful
Yes.
for, that he's here, that he's
Yes.
alive. Um, thank you for my marriage. It just can be really practical. So to me, that's always really valuable. It's like, how can I do this throughout my day? And you can, and it's easy. It just requires conscious thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you just mentioned thankfulness so many times. And that's
Mm,
something that is a huge part of my marriage.
mm-hmm,
And something that the Lord really got intentional with teaching me early on in my marriage was like, hey, Paris, if you're not choosing to put on my joy and strength and thankfulness every day, things are going to be not so awesome.
yeah.
And so this is a bonus point now, you guys. This is something that I didn't write in here, but it is a massive part, I think, in every marriage that is actively growing forward and flourishing, is putting on a spirit of thankfulness every single day, choosing
Mm-hmm.
thankfulness. I love that you mentioned that, because that's a big deal. For
Well,
sure it
it's
is.
something too, like we teach our children's, we try like our children's, our kids, we're trying to like ingrain, say thank you, whatever. Um, but then how often, like because I always, if Theo wants something and I have an orange in my hand and he reaches for the orange, I'll kind of like hold on to it for a sec, even though he's trying to grab it, and he'll be like, oh, thank you. He'll like, it'll cue it in his brain to say thank you. Cause I'm like kind of,
Yes.
okay, look, like looking at his eyes, like you're acknowledging me, like I'm giving you this orange, say thank you. And I found I've done it with Jeff too. Like now he wants something. He's like, hey, can you
Yeah.
pass me this? And then I'm like holding it, or it's like, please, whatever, right? And he's like, okay, thank you. And I'm realizing like I'm wanting that from him. Like I want him to be like, hey, thanks for cleaning up the things. I gassed up the vehicle, and I was like, Jeff, isn't it so great that I gassed up this vehicle for us? Like, isn't
Mm-hmm.
this amazing? And I just wanted him to acknowledge it and be like, hey, thanks for doing that. But it's such
Yeah.
a trivial thing that, but it really just, it makes us feel seen and valued, just to feel, thanked for what we're doing. And yeah, to be thankful for our spouse. It's huge.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. It's such a big deal. And it's such a fun journey, like you're saying. Like, I love that. Okay, let's go on to our point number 4 here is communication. We're not going to go deep into this because Alana and I have definitely put out episodes on communication before. This is definitely a heart song of Alana. Alana loves to talk about this. So
Yeah.
I'm handing the mic over to you.
Okay. No, it's true. Yeah, communication to me is key. And yeah, we do talk about it all the time. We have a whole episode devoted to this if you want to hear more about it. But
Mhm.
clear communication is key to, a thriving marriage,
Yeah.
whether it's communication about what's going on in your day, how you're feeling, communication
Mhm.
about sex, communication during sex. Like there's so many different
Mhm.
facets of it. But
Mhm.
something also when I'm thinking about Christian, marriage fundamentals, to me, something that can help with the emotional part of it is
Mhm.
to share the hard stuff right away.
Yeah, for
So say
sure.
something's going on and feelings are hurt,
Mhm.
like learn to let your spouse know right away. Be like,
Yeah.
hey, actually, that tone made me feel like this. And maybe it's
Mhm.
just perceived. And something when we were at
Right.
a workshop, they were like, the story in my mind is that you're upset with me. To word
Mm.
it like that, where it's like, this is just in my head,
Yes.
this is what I'm understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. So
Yes.
can you clarify it for me?
Yeah,
So, like,
absolutely.
but to get the air out and say these words so you're not letting
Mhm.
things pile up, you're not bottling up your thoughts and feelings, you're laying things on the table so
Yeah.
you can then work through it and
Yeah.
then work on getting connected afterwards,
Yeah.
right?
I
Because
love that.
it's really difficult to connect sexually when you're disconnected emotionally.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So to then just work on that stuff throughout the day, so it's not like 11 at night and your spouse is like, hey, like, let's go light some candles. You're like, you know
Mhm.
what? I'm actually still upset about this and this and this and this. So no, I don't want to have sex right now. Right? Of
Yeah.
course. You're like, you have other things that you're like, you know what? I still have hurt feelings about this. So can we talk about
Mhm.
this first? But to just get
Mhm.
it done as it's happening. Um, but yeah, like who wants to have that sexual connection when you don't feel like your emotional needs are being met, right? Or you're
Exactly.
having those conversations. So, yes,
Exactly.
I could talk about that all day long, but let's go to
Yeah.
the next one.
Yeah. Love it. No, that's so good. So good. So here's our last fundamental that we wanted to share with you guys for a growing, thriving marriage, and that is being fully present for your spouse. You know what? Can I go a step further and also saying being fully present even for yourself? Because you mentioned
Mm,
this earlier, Alana, and you're like, you need to know whose you are, yes, but also who you are. You need to also be fully present for yourself, because if you're not putting time into you, it's doubtful that you're putting time into your relationship with the Lord, how you're truly feeling, really feeling what's going on inside yourself. And if you're
mhm,
not at that place with yourself, it's going to be so hard to be able to serve. Actually, I'm going to say it's not going to be possible to fully serve out of the goodness of your heart that way, because you're going to be giving from a place of emptiness.
right.
And I think specifically speaking to mamas and women right now, because we are blessed with this amazing, amazing capacity to do so many things and to keep giving and giving and giving and giving and not getting. And I just want to remind you of something that my mom had said to me that just changed my view, like hardcore a few years ago in early motherhood was, Jesus, even though in his infinite wisdom and having all of the answers and literally being God himself, still took time when he was human to be by himself and be present with himself and with the Lord. I'm like, if Jesus chose to do that and be an example for us in that, like, we better take that to heart because it is a game changer, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of a side note, but I really wanted to elaborate on that for a second. But going back into being fully present for your spouse as well, is something that Alana and I enjoy talking about. And it's like, first and foremost, learn how to speak their love language, learn their love language and learn how to speak it. That is ultimately going to show them that they are your priority, that they are your lover and you're theirs and they're your number one, is a big deal.
It's something that comes to mind for me as well when I'm thinking about love languages and stuff, is to be able to share how your spouse can speak your love language, to be specific about what you like or what they can do that can up that emotional connection so your love tank is being filled. So when I was thinking about it and thinking about, being present and learning your love language and stuff, I was thinking about it as like two tanks. So if you have, when you're doing the things that make your spouse feel loved and seen and cherished and desired, it's filling up this love tank. And then once that tank is like brimming to the top and overflowing, and that's when it's spilling into the intimacy desire, like the desire to have intimacy.
I love that. That's a good analogy.
Right? So you just see it in your brain.
Yes.
And so when you're having those emotional connections and you're praying for your spouse, you're communicating, you're speaking their love languages, you're filling up this tank that then ups this desire to have intimate time together. And so like I said earlier, it'll be so much easier, so much more enjoyable to connect sexually once you and your spouse have, met each other's emotional needs.
For sure.
And so it looks like so many different things. And something else that came to mind with it, I feel like regardless of your love language, quality time together is a huge way to then fill that tank.
Absolutely.
Right? I feel like regardless, we all want one-on-one time with our spouse to build that connection.
And
that
it's
intimacy.
a need. It's a need for a healthy marriage.
So whether it's, going for a drive together, playing a game, maybe it's summer, you can go camping and your kids are in bed and you're just sitting by a campfire together, or you're on the couch and you're chatting, you're going away for the weekend, that just face-to-face connection time is super valuable and can really help you to then talk about all these other things and then make a plan. Be like, do you feel like I'm doing 100? Do you feel like you're doing 100 in this marriage? What does it look like for us to give 100 and 100 each? How can we be growing so we're not moving backwards? Just to talk about it, but to make time to be able to have that face-to-face time, because it can be really tricky, and it doesn't have to be fancy, guys. You just like chilling on the couch together. But this is all a part of how to grow that, exciting, spicy marriage. Is just takes all these different steps and then giving 100 regardless of where your spouse is at. But I promise it will be worth it. And you need to have that emotional connection before you can even think about the sexual connection.
Yes.
It's all a process. And so we can just encourage you to just make the change and be the change, because it's so, so worth it.
Hey friends, thank you so much for hanging out with us as we dive deeper into meaningful, godly intimacy, tackle the hard questions, and embrace truth while we're at it. We're also on Instagram at Kingdom Sexuality. You'll find our Instagram handle below in the show notes, where you'll also see any other resource links we may have mentioned in today's episode. As always, our hearts are to cultivate deep community and freedom with you guys, and we cannot wait to continue this journey alongside you. We'll see you in the next episode.